the people had done it themselves. Hey everybody, Evan Bowser here. This is episode 1 of my new series, The Green Gossip. Today I'm joined by Karl Frank. He's an environmental advocate and educator, and he's also a bird enthusiast, bird watcher, and an amateur naturalist. So today we're going to be discussing a series of relevant environmental issues, and we're going to wrap up with a more open conversation about waste management and our perspectives on that situation. So yeah, how are you doing?
I'm good, really good. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. Man, it's a hot day.
Yeah. Is it 90, 95, 90?
Yeah. So earlier this week, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, they basically proclaimed that they're almost positive that this winter is going to be an El Niño season, which is just going to mean intensified weather, intensified hurricanes and storms, and it's going to really threaten food security and just access. So that's a really big issue, and it seems to me like these El Niño seasons are happening more frequently almost.
Yeah, I think that's the case.
Yeah.
It seems like warming climate is causing that whole oscillation between hot and cold to just intensify and the frequency to increase.
Mm-hmm.
We're in for, it sounds like a wet winter in California and maybe a cold winter back east.
Yeah. I mean, it's really wild how, recently the weather patterns have been so different, and everyone realizes it. I mean, I've seen even on Snapchat, people are making like stories out of it. Like it's becoming like a thing where we're like a spectacle almost.
Right.
But this has real impact on people's lives.
Oh yeah.
Like I've said, food security. That's a big thing.
Right. I was just reading up on this. The last El Niño event caused massive famine in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
People are still relying on food aid there. 8 million people still getting food assistance.
From the last one.
From the last one.
Right.
2016.
Right.
And now we're headed for another one. And the likely scenarios that these intensify over time. So that more and more people are going to be.
Right.
There's going to be more disruption to the food distribution system.
Yeah, and I want to clarify that I don't want to seem like this is a doomsday podcast, but it is definitely, I'm definitely doing this, to raise awareness about what's actually happening, because we do need to. It's important to have like a healthy dose of reality. I feel like in these
we can't bury our heads in the sand.
Right.
Climate change is happening, and the more we sort of talk about it and discuss some of the effects, more likely we are to, look at adapting or ways to adapt to some of these changes that are, right on our doorstep.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that actually brings me into another thing that I do want to discuss, which is even last month was it was the third hottest June in the history of humanity.
Right.
And it's kind of scary because, as I've mentioned on Let Us Eat, the past few years, each of the past few years have been the hottest year.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not positive about this, but I think with the exception of 2017, which I think is just an outlier, I don't think that indicates that it's going to go back down or anything. I just think that there's fluctuations and stuff like that.
Right.
But it's really concerning because we're only halfway through the year. It's July now, and the U.S. alone has already spent approximately $6 billion on aid for weather conditions.
Right.
I mean, I go to school in Ohio, and we had a brutal winter, like absolutely brutal, and there was so much damage from this, like infrastructure damage from the storms and stuff, and And then there are also tornadoes in March in Alabama that just tore through counties, and it was brutal. So
and the hurricanes last year, with
right,
Texas, and
right,
Puerto Rico, and Florida.
right. They're still recovering.
Yep.
So it's really scary to see how, these things continue to happen and amplify. The magnitude amplifies, but we're still trying to, recover from the previous ones.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Will we catch up?
Right.
And the insurance industry is reeling as well, because their losses, as these kind of intense storm events increase in frequency, the payouts from the insurance companies are escalating, and, and they're projecting there's a point not too far down the road when the insurance industry can find many areas of the United States and around the world uninsurable.
Yeah.
Which is
insane.
Again, you don't want to be too dark.
Right.
But that's that's a big change in sort of what our system has been. For
right. Definitely an eye opener. I mean, I remember maybe not an exact year ago, but it was early in my junior year of college. I was watching this episode of The Daily Show, and they were talking about the repercussions of, I think it was a flood, or it was either a flood or a hurricane in the southeast region of the country, and they were talking about how the floodplain maps were so inaccurate. Oh, it wasn't The Daily Show.
John Oliver.
Yeah, it was John Oliver.
In the flood insurance program.
Right. Where was that?
Maybe Texas.
Oh yeah, I think.
It's nationwide.
Right.
And I actually just listened to a piece on the radio about this where, in many cases people are getting settlements from the flood insurance program, rebuilding their house or doing the renovations that need to be done, and they're doing it right in the exact same spot without putting their house up on stilts like they're supposed to, and then they get hit again because they're still in that floodplain, and they'll file another claim, get some more money, fix it up, get hit again. And there's some houses that are, the piece was looking at, this is systemic across the entire nation, but there's some houses that are like, they're valued at $300,000, but they've had $9 million in claims over the years to repair their house.
Right.
This is just another.
What are you gonna like?
It's unsustainable.
That's like financial gridlock completely, man. That's really insane. 9 million.
Yeah, and that may be maybe sort of the most extreme
Yeah,
case,
but still, that's out there. Yeah. Like that's a reality for some families.
Yeah.
This whole issue of like floods and hurricanes, and really just water in general, the way that water threatens communities is another thing that I think we should definitely talk about. Sea level rise is such a prevalent issue right now, and it's really interesting because I feel like whenever people who talk a lot about sustainability and climate change and these issues, I feel like the main cities that are always discussed are New York, Miami, but I don't really hear LA that often. Why do you think that is? Because it's definitely a threat.
Yeah,
it's definitely at risk.
Coastal communities.
Right. Look at Venice, Santa Monica, like
Hermosa, Redondo, all the way down, and certainly Malibu.
Mm-hmm.
We do sort of rise fairly quickly away from the coast. Elevation builds, and the valley we're several hundred feet above sea level, so or a few hundred feet.
Right.
But yeah, LA's not, and Miami's already subject to nuisance flooding. They're seeing some. They're pretty low.
They're
6
right
inches
there.
When you're that close to the sea level is, sea level rise is a big thing. New York, of course, has lots of subterranean, subway systems and tunnels and all that are already being inundated. So, plus they have I think they have the added, regular storm surge from hurricanes and tropical storms.
Right.
Whereas we have the Pacific, which is, tends to be, fairly calm.
Yeah. And getting like to your point about sea level rise and about Miami, this past semester, in one of my classes, we were visited by this author named Jeff Goodell, who wrote this book called "The Water Will Come: Rising Seas, Sinking Cities, and the Remaking of a Civilized World," and he in his book he talks about how he went to Miami, and actually he told us when he came to our class that a lot of like Miami like real estate developers they hate this guy because he basically ruined their whole like industry because with this one book. And he in one of the, I forget where it was in the book, probably relatively close to the beginning, but he says he went to some of the places that were closest to the ocean, lowest sea level, most flat, and he said it was basically like standing in like what will soon be like Atlantis, like, which is insane. Like I mean, we're talking about these things now, but I feel like it's kind of difficult to fully fathom like the actual reality of that being the case in 15, 20 years.
Yeah, so many of us are we're so caught up in our sort of just day-to-day struggle to survive. It's really hard to look down the road and see these changes coming. But at the same time, we've got to start thinking about how to adapt because, like you said, those guys, real estate developers hate this guy.
Yeah.
He's gonna, with the book, he's gonna have an impact on the economy there, and that's. We have to think differently about our economy going forward because it's the change is coming. I mean, we're not going to stop emitting carbon overnight, and the carbon that's already up there is going to continue to keep things warm for us.
Right.
So, it's definitely about adaptation right now, and at the same time, innovation.
Oh, definitely, yeah. No, innovation I think is going to be. I would say environmental engineering. If there's any like kids in high school watching this, I highly recommend pursuing something in the field of environmental engineering because we need you desperately. We need you. I actually just attended this 2-day like conference. It was the Environmental Media Association.
Oh, okay.
So
was that here?
Yeah, it was in
Nice.
Beverly Hills, and it was a ton of celebrities. Van Jones was there. Jaden Smith was there. Ed Begley Jr. was there. A ton of actors, musicians, TV personalities, all kinds of people, and they're all super focused on how can we prolong this situation that we're in. How can we prolong the ultimate demise, pretty much.
Right.
And well, part of the 2-day summit was this actual kind of grant competition, like for grant money at the end.
Oh, wow.
And there was one really interesting company. I'm blank on the name, but there was this one really fascinating company that they are doing this now in Silicon Valley. They actually have developed some kind of technology that can turn materials into carbon absorbing material. Yeah, they can.
Wow.
Yeah, that fly.
Okay.
But yeah, they have this. It's like this, almost like this. They brought in like a sample, and it was like a fabric that's basically capable of
Pulling carbon out of the air.
Yeah, pulling carbon out of the air, that's the kind of innovation that we need,
Yeah.
And then there was another company that they developed this technology where it's like these floor tiles, and if you're standing or walking on the floor tiles, the kinetic energy like generated from that like powers, like they're actually doing a deal with some baseball stadium. I'm not even sure if I'm still like allowed to say because it was kind of like on the hush.
Right.
But they're doing a big deal where they're going to be redoing the whole energy grid for a baseball stadium in the United States. And
so I don't know how specific I can get.
Right.
But
Yeah.
So the 8th grade students last year at the school where I teach worked in a science investigations class where they did a competition, and they had that sort of same idea, piezoelectric generation with vehicles.
Oh, wow.
And there have been some ideas floating around about these roadways, some prototypes being done, but these kids, sort of developed prototypes in the class, and they went to the national competition from our school. They went to DC, and they won the state of California outright, and had some grant money come to them from that. But then I think they came in 3rd in the national competition, which is
oh, wow,
which is pretty cool.
really?
That same concept of a mass impacting a surface with the electric generating potential in that embedded in that surface to create. In that case, it was electric current and ultimately light.
Yeah.
So pretty cool.
Wow, yeah, that's fascinating. I earlier this year I actually just got a Prius, which I love,
Nice.
and it's so fun like driving it downhill because every time while the car is going downhill, it generates kinetic energy, which charges the battery.
Nice.
So it's nice, like when I pull out of the driveway, and I'll have like a fully charged like EV battery, so I can go 30 miles without using any gas, and then but like sometimes if like on a hot summer day like today, it won't reach 30 miles exactly because I'll have the AC blasting.
Sure.
So it'll be like 27, but then I'll get it up to 30 as I like go down the hill.
Right.
So it's nice. I really like that. So like we need those kinds of innovations because they're imperative. And actually, getting back to the whole like EMA summit with the grant competition, the winner was this company called, I remember the winner. They were called Watchtower Robotics, and they were represented by this one guy who was probably just finished grad school at MIT. And basically their innovation was this little flexible robot. It was like this little squishy robot that that plumbers can use, and basically you give it to the plumbers, and then they can put the little robot into the pipes, and then on a smartphone app it'll tell them where the leaks are.
Right.
Because we lose so much potable water to just bad infrastructure.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and they're the ones that ended up winning like a ton of money, like 75 grand.
College students or high school kids?
They just finished. I think they just finished graduate school, but they went to MIT. It was either like undergrad or graduate school. I'm pretty sure graduate school though.
I'm gonna check
So
it out.
yeah. I definitely expect to see a lot of those around in the next few years. Yeah.
Part of the thing that needs to happen, and we have a lot of those technologies that are out there right now that can sort of help us. And there needs to be sort of, and there are so many philanthropists and startup corporations, companies that are giving money, but there needs to be sort of a widespread embrace of some of these new technologies so we can quickly shift over to using them. It's kind of like how fast can we transition right now to, all electric vehicles.
Right. Yeah. And I think that a big part of that transition is also like location, because in here in Los Angeles, it's easy to find EV charging ports or like you can easily call up 100 different solar installation people, but that's not the case all throughout the U.S. and certainly not throughout the world. So I think it's really important that the people who do have that kind of mobility and access not only try to impact their immediate communities, but try to see how far they can really spread their impact like that, because it's so critical right now. I mean, like we're not talking about like long term anymore.
No.
It's scary because every time I go on like a website like Grist, or if I go on like the NOAA like .org website, it's gonna be just bad news. Pretty much.
It's exponential growth.
Exactly.
It's ramping up, and so we've climbed out of the background noise, and we're looking at 2 degrees of warming just around the corner, and then from there it's.
Well, didn't we already break that like last year?
1.5 for sure. And maybe we are getting.
Yeah, I remember last year I was like on the bus going back to school, and I like saw on my phone that it wasn't like a temporary or a permanent, like crossing that line, but for a very short period of time in the northern hemisphere, we did go over 2 degrees Celsius, which is heartbreaking. Like, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Like, it's really sad. And I remember when I was in high school, there's this other kid who was outspoken environmentalist, and he had this nickname which was Mr. 150. You know what I'm talking about? Caden.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, awesome.
So yeah. So he thought that 150 was like, oh well, in 150 years we're gonna be gone.
Oh. Okay.
And and at the time people were making fun of him, but now it's like, do we even have that long? Like I mean, within the next 15 years, we might not even have like internet.
It's tough. I mean, so we lived in Bellingham for a while, and I think I talked with you about this, but there were a very active group called Transition Whatcom up there that were working on, within the city of Bellingham, Washington, how can the city itself move away from fossil fuels and become self-reliant.
Right.
But they were really struggling with, okay, we're located right between Seattle and Vancouver, British Columbia, and as those two major population centers sort of struggle to obtain calories,
Right.
they're going to move to Whatcom County, which is the breadbasket of that part of Washington. But there were definitely people there that were, they were saying there's absolutely no techno fix. At that time, this is 10 years ago now.
Right.
There's no way we can innovate. There's no way we can adapt fast enough. The best, I remember this sort of being young educator looking at climate change pretty seriously. And one of the leaders in the community got up and said, look, if you want to invest in anything, invest in a mortuary, coffin building business.
Yeah.
That's the future. And there's a community out there. That's the dark side of this whole thing. But there's a community out there that says, the future is, we've overshot the carrying capacity. And as we become more and more affluent, we're pushing those resources harder and harder while we pump carbon into the atmosphere. And that's a heartbreaking, of course, really dark scenario. And I don't want to subscribe to that as a person. I want to maintain that
optimistic
belief and optimistic outlook that I've always had that says, human ingenuity, it's a beautiful day in Southern California.
Right.
Society is still intact, relatively speaking. And, I earnestly believe with the right leadership globally, we can get through this. And I'll keep believing that until
it's literally impossible.
But we need to keep talking about it, and we have to obviously participate in politics and be locally active.
Right.
And
definitely.
there is
and vote. We have to vote. That's so important today because a lot of people think that their votes don't matter, but really if you're not getting to the polls, you're doing beyond the bare minimum.
Sure.
And it's so critical that you actually get involved in local politics. And you don't have to be going to every town hall meeting, but I do think it's important that young people actually get out there and voice their opinions because we're really going to be the ones that have to deal with all the ramifications of this.
Yeah, you're inheriting what mess from prior generation, or there's some great stuff, of course, too.
Right, and this stuff, this whole environmental movement, it really, started to kind of get the ball rolling on just this environmental awareness in the 60s, but it the first Earth Day wasn't until 1970, and so it's a modern it's a modern issue, and we still have a lot of time left. There's still a lot of time left on the clock, but to quote Van Jones, actually, the last time I said him, he said, there's time left, but we are in the fourth quarter, and we're down a lot. So it's if this is something that doesn't just matter to you, but if this is something that concerns you, if you're hearing what we're saying right now and you feel I feel like I'm not doing enough, it's you feel like there's more that you could do, then there is more you could be doing, and you have to realize that. I started this YouTube channel about sustainability this summer. That I'm not even doing everything I could be doing,
Well, you are. You're fully activated, and I view you as a huge role model in many ways.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And getting it going because, like I said, if people aren't talking about it and people are burying their heads in their sand, so many of the kids in environmental science show up, and we do a survey in the beginning of the class, and their initial feeling is it's too late for us. They come in and they're like, game over. We're just riding that down slope, and they've sort of already given up. And I'm like, my whole year is you cannot give up because if you give up, we all collectively give up. Yeah, we're going down. But two, that mental attitude of, I'm not going to do anything. It's already too late. Sort of lets you off the hook in some way, and you can stay in that either denial state or sort of, well, I'll watch the ship go down.
Right.
And so people need to dig deep and do what they can.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
and it's not just environmental, right?
Of course
social
not.
Justice. And,
and
environmental or economic justice.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of really reminds me of why I wanted to do this series, which is in this one like political science course I took like in my freshman year, we were talking about how on the news, if you turn on like MSNBC or CNN or Fox News or any of these news outlets, politically charged news outlets, and they're talking about some environmental issue, you're gonna find that there's two people debating some issue, you know.
Right.
And I wanted to create this, you know, because I wanted to offer an alternative to that kind of content and showing that that's not even the reality. The reality is that there's probably even higher than 97% consensus within the scientific community at this point that climate change is very real.
Yeah.
You don't even have to wonder or ponder that. You know, it's evident. I don't know if you guys live in LA, but it is hot out here.
Yeah.
Like it was literally 110 degrees like a couple days ago.
Right.
So we're seeing the effects of it now.
Public awareness of the issue continues to rise, and
Right.
it only makes sense because we're living through it. We're not idiots. We
Right.
recognize, like, oh yeah, the signs are all around us. It's
Yeah.
obvious that humanity is having an impact on the biosphere.
Yeah, clearly. So I kind of want to get into this next little bit about the internet and it's threatened right now. You know, it's at risk. Like internet access in some U.S. cities is at risk within the next like 20 years.
Right.
So there's this new report that I just found actually earlier today that basically said that 4,000 plus miles of this wide culvert, which is basically like a channel or a conduit, basically it provides access to major cities in the U.S. like Miami, New York, and Seattle, and these locations are going to be greatly threatened by not having internet access because of sea level rise. Basically, you know, so the like the fiber optic cables that actually, you know, give us internet,
Right.
or give us internet access rather, they're water resistant, but they're not waterproof.
Wow.
So so as sea level continues to rise and these things are just submerged in water,
Right.
we're gonna start to see patches of space within our own country where people aren't gonna be able to freely communicate like we have been for the last 20 so years, which is that's really scary, you know. I mean, earlier this year everyone was freaking out about net neutrality.
Right.
It's like, well, we might not even have
together, right?
Yeah, we could lose it altogether.
Yeah, we
So-
don't want to go backwards, right?
Oh, definitely
we
not.
Need access to all the information. It's such a beautiful tool that's available to us now at the time where we really need it.
Right, yeah. And it's been around my whole life, and it's like I can't even imagine a world without the internet at this point.
Right.
Like I learn so much every day from watching YouTube videos and just like reading online, and like I don't really go on Facebook too much, but just like I can't even imagine a world without the internet at this point. It's scary.
So and for somebody who grew up in the 1970s in
Right.
New Hampshire with no internet whatsoever, to be in a place where now basically all of human knowledge is available at a few clicks,
Right.
almost from wherever you are. It's like ubiquitous, right?
Yeah.
It's miraculous.
Yeah, it really
not
is.
something I could have conceived of as a kid.
No.
It was Encyclopedia Britannica. It
Yeah,
was like we had
exactly. Yeah.
books, right?
Yeah.
So,
It's just it's really wild that, you know, sea level rise has all these other implications that we're not really taking into consideration, you know. Like, I mean, there are already islands in like the eastern hemisphere that are pretty much gone.
Yeah.
And it's insane.
yeah, it is.
We've really kind of sold ourselves short in terms of actually thinking about the ramifications of climate change and how quickly they're onsetting.
Right.
Like I don't think we really took into account, you know, like when I said, like my friend in high school said, we have 150 years, like
Right.
we only have like a few. Like,
It could be.
yeah.
For sure. I went to a thing at UCLA
Mhm.
this spring, which I was kind of in a darker space about the environment and
Right.
feeling like sort of like this 15-30 years it's headed south kind of
Yeah.
scenario. Certainly, I mean, you read the news and you can kind of spiral into that, and it was really refreshing. A few students in the environmental science class went,
Yeah.
and they are actively planning. Los Angeles is, and many municipalities are actively planning to, get the grid off of fossil fuels, coal in particular.
Yeah. Entirely?
Entirely.
Oh, okay, that's good.
And I was pretty well unaware of it. I knew, LA had a timeline for moving away, but I didn't realize that they were actually taking concrete steps year by year, chipping away at it, and that they were pretty well on track. It's like, and the entire West Coast grid, in some sense, is on track by 2050, 2075 to be, fossil-free, coal-free, which, you don't see that in the news media very much. It's kind of underreported unless you sort of go to these public, forum events. People wouldn't necessarily know, but it's pretty cool. LA is doing it.
Yeah.
And of course, if LA's doing it, then Portland and many other cities are as well.
I do want to talk about this this whole, like, did you hear about Starbucks with the plastic straws?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your feeling on that? Because me, I feel like it's too little, too late. I mean,
yeah.
I'm like great for them for like cutting out straws finally, but they said they're gonna do it by 2020. It's like, why can't you just do it today?
Yeah. Just when the straws are out, when you run out of the store, don't resupply, just be done.
Like these decisions are made by just a few people in like a little boardroom. Like, why are they waiting 2 years?
My daughter and I have been talking about this a lot in the car. We just did a backpack up in Yosemite, and we were in Ventura a couple of days before we left, and driving up there, we noticed the agricultural fields were covered in plastic.
Oh, wow.
There's a process. I don't know if they're trying to retain moisture or prevent erosion, wind-blown topsoil. But I was like, there's probably more plastic within our field of view right now than all the Starbucks in California.
Right.
So we were talking about that. Like, it's a good gesture. Wow. It increases the Starbucks move away from straws, increases public awareness about plastic. And it's certainly a good PR move for the company. Mm-hmm. But you look at the plastic in the ocean right now, and the trend with our plastic waste going into the ocean. It's going to take a lot more than getting rid of straws. Yeah. And the thing that's tough about this is that, and we talked about this, is that getting rid of straws means that, and we had kids in environmental science this year that were like, I have a new aluminum straw that I take with me everywhere I go, and that's really cool. It's reusable. Yeah. It's not, the disposable plastic economy. Right. But then what energy is required to produce that aluminum straw, and then if you bend it, you got to get another one. Right. Is there bacteria growing on the inside of that aluminum straw?
Yeah.
If you're drinking milk, is there going to be a colony in there? You're going to wind up getting, and then so you're going to need a we talk about this a lot. You need a bottle brush, right? Something to get in there and clean that straw.
And
so
that takes
creating a whole nother economy,
right?
Which we're just a society that needs a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And there's always room for more entrepreneurial spirit. We were like, my daughter was like, boy, if we invent these little straws, bottle brush, straw brushes, we'll make millions, right?
Right. Yeah. I feel like I always tell my friends, like, when we get into the dark side of climate change and like the actual reality of it, it always boils down to like carrying capacity. And I always just say, like, I feel like humans are inherently bad for the environment because, take carrying capacity off the table, which that is definitely a determining factor of like how long we can survive and everything. But for me, I feel like also humans are just so naturally materialistic, and we always need these things. I mean, maybe when we were like at the beginning of humanity, when we were more cavemen, even then we were using these tools, and we were always using other materials to further ourselves and for our advancement. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just that we always are trying to engineer our ways out of problems. And to your point about these solutions ultimately end up creating new problems. It is interesting because you might you can even take that to like wind turbines and solar panels. If you overproduce those things, then you're using up rare earth metals and all kinds of materials that are non-renewable. Right. You're creating renewable energy, but you're still utilizing materials that that aren't always going to replenish and like are limited. Resources are limited.
So two things came up while you were talking. So the idea that humans are inherently bad for the planet, there is some truth to that, in that and it's this dichotomy, because you look around and we're also we're beautiful, and we create music and art and robust dramatic performance, everything that we do as a community, and we I think that part of our story on Earth is just so amazing. But we do form, as a species, we do form these. I think we talked about this, these like really intense bonds with not just immediate family, but friendships.
Right.
And then we maintain those friendships over time, and that involves travel.
Right.
And so we, as a species, we now have planetary movement where we're all going everywhere to see friends and family. We have family in Sweden. We want to get back there and see them.
Right.
And everyone has family everywhere, and we all want to be able to keep those ties going and reconnect.
Right.
And that necessitates a lot of
air travel,
and road travel. And so those, and you could see a future where we use internet and laptops and telepresence and virtual reality to be together more, but in a sort of disconnected way. But there is that possibility.
Yeah, so we're about to wrap up here, but I do want to talk about one last thing, which is just the condition of the way we view waste right now, like where that culture is, because I actually saw this one documentary. I forget the name of it, but there's a few places in Europe where people only generate like 1 or 2 plastic bags worth of trash, and then here we have, as you told me today on Instagram, like we have such this throwaway culture that there's, as many of you know, I'm sure there's multiple like islands of trash just floating in the ocean, and a lot of our e-wastes ends up in like China, just washing up on their shore. So you can't really ever throw something away. You throw it away, but that's really just you getting it out of your immediate vicinity, and it's more of just like a mental thing. Right. But I feel like, every single plastic object I've ever used is still out there somewhere.
Right.
Because insane to think about.
Yeah, it's very hard to think about, especially when you know. Right, but it's like, by 2050, there's gonna be more plastic, pound for pound, more plastic in the ocean than fish. So
that's just depressing.
So there's a growing use of biological materials, bio-based plastics, like the sort of cast-offs from the food production industry, bits of corn cobs that you can't use as anything for caloric value, but they're finding a process to turn those into not plastic but cutlery, and it's biodegradable on some shorter time scale. But the water bottle thing, that's
a big one. That's definitely a big one.
And I don't know what the solution is there, other than trying to drink water as best we can. Our whole culture, certainly in Los Angeles, is you look everywhere and everybody has single-use plastic water bottle, and
it's insane.
Part of the waste stream.
Right.
Maybe we get to a future where we there's certainly there's a math problem there, right? Where there's a percentage of our culture of folks that are woke, or they're making conscious choices to limit their use of plastic as best they can. And I'm certainly not perfect in my life. There's a fair amount of plastic in our home, and single-use plastic, but more people making conscious choices over time, recognizing that this is winding up in the ocean, and it's there for in some cases hundreds of years, or that there's an impact on wildlife.
Right.
And we see that in our social media every day. So maybe we move more and more to reusable water bottles on a daily basis.
I think that there needs to be What I'm really excited for, and what something I really want to be a big part of, is like the green economy, like revolution, which is definitely on the horizon.
Yeah.
You're starting to see it with brands like this. This Jaden Smith's water bottle company, Just Water, and like you're starting to see it, like I said with Watchtower Robotics, and there's so many out there. I mean, it's hard to think. Pretty much any vegan restaurant you know of, that's part of the green revolution. Like just that kind of stuff is really important and exciting to me, because those are the kinds of solutions I feel like are win-win for like our culture, our society, because it's almost impossible, I feel like, to, I don't want to say anything's impossible, but I feel like it's almost impossible to wean people off of the materialistic kind of culture, the consumer culture that we're in. So the best thing that we can do is offer trendy things that people want. Like, for example, if you go to like the Grove, Sprinkles Cupcakes, they give you like biodegradable plates for your cupcakes.
Okay.
Which I love.
See?
I love that. Yeah. Like I think that's great. And like we need to have more innovations like that, because they're like, and you can do like low-hanging fruit type stuff with that too. Like it doesn't have to be some super crazy thing, but then there's also, you can go super crazy with, like, there's another company called Ecos, which they do all kinds of like environmentally friendly like cleaning supplies, like for your household. And they make all kinds of stuff, like detergent, like, dish soap, all kinds of crazy stuff. So there's a huge scale, I feel like, and it's really like, and I think the most important thing that we can do is, if you're gonna be a green company, you have to do so on all fronts. Like sustainably sourcing your food, like treating your employees in a like socially sustainable way, like all kinds of stuff like that.
And I would say, it's education, of course, is part of the answer.
Definitely.
And it does seem like, your generation and the students that we see in school are growing up with this, I mean, my own children are growing up with this awareness that, the biosphere is in trouble. And so that is present in your generation, pretty much across the board. And so sort of some of the old ways, it feels like it takes forever, but the old ways are more sort of impactful, are kind of phasing out with the older folks, and you guys are coming in with a whole host of new solutions and more innovative and lower carbon approaches. Sometimes it feels like it's just so slow.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's hard to definitely hard to keep your head up when this is like the thing you do, because there's so much bad news out there, but at the same time there is a lot of good news out there. There's so many like incredible like innovations, like I mentioned earlier, there's a company out there that's turning carbon into all kinds of things. Like the guy literally is working to make, like, there's a really like trendy shoe right now. I mean, it's been around for a while, the Nike Air Max.
Yeah.
He's literally turning carbon dioxide into like the Nike Vapor Max or something like that. It's like,
oh wow,
so cool.
Really cool.
Yeah.
That's the future for sure. I mean, if we can do that, then we're good.
Exactly. Yeah. And like people like Elon Musk. Also, I just found out this past weekend, his brother, I think his name is Kimball.
Yeah.
He's starting this food initiative with schools. It's called Big Green.
Okay.
It had a different name at first, but now he's calling it Big Green, and it's basically bringing these kind of like these organic gardens to schools all around the U.S. and they raise food, and it's basically like a garden/playground.
Nice.
Which sounds
That's
great.
awesome.
That's definitely like that's gonna inspire kids for sure.
Yeah. Right.
That's awesome.
Right.
Like we
Getting
need
kids involved in food production and understanding where their food comes from.
Right. Yeah. So I really enjoyed this conversation, even though it got dark at times.
Gotta go a little bit dark so you don't hold it off too far, and you sort of face the reality that we are locked in an existential crisis like we've never seen. I mean, that's the reality. The planet is heating up because of our actions, and if we don't collectively act, it's gonna be too late. So you have to be able to look a little bit in there and see the dark future to be able to be like, oh, this is not good. We gotta pull away from that.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, healthy dose of reality. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciated it. We should do it again sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can get you on Let Us Eat too.
I'd be happy
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah, I'd love that. Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Yeah, thanks so much. All
Anytime.
right. Yeah, you guys have a good day.
Don't you forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Don't you forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Do it!